Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have another card as part of the Butterfly Reflections Ink design team. I'm going to be featuring several stamp sets that you can find in the store and also a stencil. So I have the stamp sets here. There's a Holy Holiday from Paper Smooches. I was really drawn to this deer silhouette in it, but I also really like a lot of the sentiments for the inside of cards, but I'm using the deer today. And then I have this sentiment and die set from W+9. I like the scripty font mixed with the plain sentiments. And then finally this stencil from Memory Box. I think it's called Tiny Snowflakes. So I started by cutting a watercolor panel, Canon 140-pound watercolor cardstock, with the stitched rectangle dies from Lawn Fawn, which you can also find in the shop. And I'm going to emboss the deer in VersaFine black ink with clear embossing powder. I find that I get a little bit better results when I use black ink and clear embossing powder than black embossing powder. So that's what I've switched to. And also the sticky inks like VersaFine always give crisp, clear impressions when you use solid stamps, like the deer is a very solid stamp. But I did experience just little touches of spots where it wasn't quite as solid as I wanted. Plus, where the stitching is on the bottom, there was these little tiny white areas. So, since I had it on hand, I took my black Copic marker and just filled in those areas. The black Copic marker is just as deep of a black, so it worked out well. And I also know that it will be completely waterproof and everything, so when I move on to add the distress stains. I'm using Distress Stain in Evergreen Bough, Peacock Feathers, and Salty Ocean. They create an extremely quick background. It is way faster than even using Distress Ink blending, which I also enjoy doing, but I like the idea that you can swipe a really quick background with these, and so I started with the Evergreen Bough, moved to the Peacock Feathers, finally to the Salty Ocean. I overlapped them a little bit and made sure that I got it completely solid. But it gives a really nice background with very minimal amount of effort. And it's going to be important to make sure that you clean up your space, your craft mat, after you add the distress inks down, just so they don't spread all over everything. And you can also wipe the deer off. Because it's embossed, it will resist it. And I'm going to continue to use that embossed resist to my advantage as I move on with the card. I'm stapling this tiny snowflake stencil to my craft sheet. First, I taped down the panel, and then I'm taping down the stencil. I am using just cheap painter's tape in the dollar store, so I'm being pretty generous with it because it doesn't cost too much. And now I want to create white snowflakes with the stencil. Usually when I use a stencil and I want to add the color through it, I use my distress inks. But with snowflakes, I'd want them to be white. So I thought that my Hero Arts white ink pigment pad, it's a unicorn white pigment pad, would work out well. And I started dabbing it on. But then I was noticing that it wasn't really getting in the cracks, and not the cracks, the openings in the stencil. And I don't know if it was because I was using this finger dauber and maybe a makeup sponge would have been a little bit more effective, as I tend to use makeup sponges more typically with stencils, but I didn't have any clean ones left. And so I decided instead of dabbing, I would just rub it in to ensure that it got in a little bit more, just a little bit more well. And then I dried it off just a little bit. You want to be careful not to apply too much heat to your stencil because your stencil is plastic and it could bend or warp with the heat, but I wanted to make sure that it was somewhat dry first. But then I decided that I didn't think there was enough snowflakes and they weren't quite the way that I was hoping they would turn out to be, so I decided to do the stencil again. I shifted the position by turning it 180 degrees and spraying it with some Perfect Pearls mist from Ranger to add some additional snowflakes and to add a slightly different look. And so I'm just mixing the bottle, making sure that all of the powder from the bottom is around, and then spraying it from about 6 inches above and dabbing off what is left of the, just like placing a paper towel on top of the stencil to kind of get what is left over, because if you lift it up right away, it might run, and then it will run under the stencil, and you won't get as crisp of an impression. Now, neither of these methods, the ink or the stencil, provided like a really super crisp image from the stencil, but I was kind of okay with that because in a real snowstorm, you don't see what the snowflake really looks like, and beyond that, it's just, it's card, so it's okay that if it's not perfect. And so I decided that I'm happy enough with the background, and I'm moving on to adding the sentiment. I cut the Mary die from some glitter cardstock. I use the same glitter cardstock for the base, and so I just cut the sentiment out of the center of it, and I'm going to glue that on. But I also want to add the Mary. I also want to add the Christmas to the Mary to create a full sentiment. So I'm just going to be stamping the Christmas on with some archival Ranger jet black ink. And I will glue, like I said, the sentiment on. I will use Ranger Multimedia Matte. It's something I recently picked up from the Butterfly Reflections ink shop, and I was really happy with it, and I thought that it worked out really nicely for gluing on details, because even when a little bit of it kind of leaked out the sides, it rubbed away really easily and didn't leave any markings at all. I decided to pop up the entire card on some Scotch 3M foam tape. It's really thin foam tape, and then I will leave the black background. I wanted to create something relatively simple, and that's why I stuck with the black for the background. But because the black cardstock is going all the way to the edge of my white card, I did notice there was a little bit of white peeking out from the edges of the card, and so in order to kind of mask that off a little bit, I decided to take a 100 black Copic marker and run it along the edges so that it would be less noticeable but wouldn't really interfere with the readability of the inner card. And so that's it for my card today. Sorry if I was a little more unfocused today. Unfortunately, my kindergartners at school have been passing around germs, and it seems to have hit me. But thanks for tuning in. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more crafty videos, please subscribe to my channel, as I'll be doing a Christmas card series. And thanks for watching. Bye.